Now that we have the chassis installed, we now are going to look at installing our outside trim. On this particular application, our outside trim consists of two major component groups: the cylinder housing and trim ring and the outside lever assembly. Now you will notice that we have two holes drilled above and below the main spindle hole here, and those are for the two through bolts that are going to attach the outside lever to the door. The other thing that we need to look at very carefully here is the location of this mortise cylinder hole, that it needs to line up with the hole in the lock case behind it. Also, there is a small set screw which is accessed through a hole here on the side of the chassis. We need to make sure that that is withdrawn to allow us to freely screw in the mortise cylinder. Now, in the particular application that we're looking at today, instead of screwing a mortise cylinder in, we're going to screw a small format interchangeable core housing in instead. The interchangeable core housing is identified by the figure 8 cutaway shape that will allow a small format core to be inserted and then with a control key and then locked in place so that you can quickly change cylinders. Now, in order to screw this in, the first thing that we have to find is actually the trim ring that will go around the mortise cylinder housing. This trim ring helps to space it out to the proper distance, but it also helps to provide protection from cylinder attacks, wrenching, hammering, etc. Is that we have this large steel ring that will fit around the face of the cylinder. Now, to screw this in, we have to be a little bit careful because there is a fine thread here on the back of the housing. And to do this, we actually have a very convenient tool, which is a small format housing installation tool. This is basically a brass tool that allows us to slide it into the cylinder and use this to help screw the cylinder in. This is a nice to have, but not a need to have. Now, I'm going to slide it in, and I'm going to try and see if I can get this started. Sometimes to get it started, I'll actually turn it backwards a little bit till I feel the threads pass each other in the initial engagement, and then I'll reverse my direction and I'll screw it in. If you were not able to get it started right away, I would take another close look to make sure that the hole in the door lines up with the hole in the case. If it doesn't, you can loosen the two screws on the top and the bottom of the mortise case so that you can move it slightly in order to get the cylinder started. Once you get it started, you can then screw those screws back down tight again. Now, I'm going to screw it in all the way tight, and we want to make sure that it's firmly screwed in and rather tight, but we don't want to necessarily do a white knuckle screw in. And then I'm going to look and make sure that the two pins are in the lower position, because that's how our core is going to engage with this. Now, just to check it before I wind up tightening the set screw, I'm actually going to insert a small format interchangeable core. This is the control key. When I turn the control key back to the straight up and down position, I can withdraw it, and that will lock the cylinder in place. Then I could actually check it with the operating key. Now that I'm confident that that is located properly, I'm going to take a Phillips screwdriver. I'm going to insert this into the side here, and I'm going to tighten the set screw, which is going to stick into the groove in the side of that housing, locking it in place. It's always very important that you remember to tighten this. If you don't remember to tighten the set screw, you could actually have the cylinder come loose, and if the cylinder rotates at all, the cam on the back will not reach the proper components to pull back the latch. Now that we have the cylinder in place, I'm going to install the outside trim for the lever here. Now, this is showing us the two through bolting screws, which are going to go through these holes. There's also a spring-loaded spindle and a spring cage built in here in order to hold the lever up. I'm going to slide these in, and sometimes when you feed them in, you may need to wiggle them just slightly so that they find their way through the lock case so that we can attach the inside trim. So our next step will be to work on the other side of the door, installing the inside.